Tonight's headlines: financial chaos in the capitals in states across the nation. The battle over who should and should not get paid for working overtime. The mysterious disappearance of a college basketball player. Also tonight, the designer drug known as Special K, a loophole in the law, is making it more popular than ever. Stress. It can take years off your life, and now scientists say they know why. And she was Hollywood royalty. Tonight, remembering the great Katharine Hepburn.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
And good evening. Dan is off tonight. I'm John Roberts. It is a New Year's Eve with little to celebrate. States all over America begin a new fiscal year at midnight, many with budgets that call for record deficits, higher taxes, and drastic cuts in programs. The nationwide economic slowdown is getting much of the blame. Some states may begin the new year without a budget. And CBS's Bill Whitaker reports it appears the most populous state in the nation, California, is close to financial meltdown.
It would take a miracle for California legislators to pass a budget by the end of the fiscal year at midnight tonight, and anxious residents are steeling themselves for the axe to drop. No budget means community college campuses closing, firefighters cut, no new highway patrol officers, classrooms, emergency rooms, all will take a hit. Nursing home residents fear they could lose the roof over their heads.
Devastated. Where would I go?
California's crisis was triggered by a monstrous $38 billion deficit and compounded by an unpopular governor and bullheaded politics. Republicans refuse to cut taxes, and Democrats refuse any further program cuts.
Now, California really is facing a meltdown. When you put it all together, budget crisis, no give, recall of governor, that to me is a meltdown.
California may be the worst, but it's hardly alone. 12 states ran smack up against today's fiscal deadline. 45 states have raised taxes or made draconian cuts. Massachusetts may be getting out of the university business. Tomorrow, the state of Washington releases 350 prison inmates to save money.
It's a sluggish economy, the terrorist attacks of 9/11, the collapse of capital gains in the stock market, and they all came together in this perfect storm to cause a dramatic decline in state revenues.
Even if all states somehow find budget money by midnight, economists say the outlook for the next fiscal year could be worse. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Los Angeles.
The Bush administration is proposing rule changes that could affect the budgets of a lot of American workers and their employers. At issue is which workers should be paid for working overtime. CBS News correspondent Wyatt Andrews has our report.
We say no! They say let's pay! We say no!
It could be the most sweeping revision of the rules for overtime pay ever enacted, and organized labor calls it unfair.
Taking away overtime pay will kill jobs.
Here's the issue. The administration would guarantee overtime rights to anyone making less than $22,100 per year. It's an increase that will protect more workers, but what if you make more? Above this amount, and your employer can declare you an executive and exempt you from overtime by saying your job holds substantial importance, or because it involves creativity or imagination. Big Labor complains those terms could apply to 8 million workers, including ambulance workers and almost anyone who writes for a living.
For the first time, you're going to see the $23,000 a year executive. This is not somebody that should be exempt from overtime.
But the Labor Department's description of these new rules couldn't be any more different. The administration says the rules will actually extend overtime rights to 1 million new workers.
The goal is not take overtime away from people. The goal is make sure overtime is in place for people.
Overtime!
The administration could adopt the new rules as early as September. The unions are asking Congress to intervene. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Washington.
In Iraq, U.S. troops have launched a new campaign dubbed Operation Sidewinder, aimed at capturing Saddam Hussein loyalists and preventing attacks on American soldiers. CBS News national security correspondent David Martin has more on that and on a recent raid that began with high hopes of capturing Saddam himself.
U.S. troops begin another series of raids in an effort to break the resistance to the American occupation. In 2 weeks, they have detained more than 1,300 people. But the three most wanted Iraqis, Saddam and his two sons, are still missing. 12 days ago, U.S. forces thought they might have at least one of them in their sights thanks to a cell phone number discovered when American troops arrested Saddam's longtime right-hand man. The number was traced to a compound near the Syrian border. U.S. intelligence monitored the phone and picked up conversations between the compound and someone in Syria talking in veiled terms about senior Iraqis, possibly Saddam or his sons. When a convoy of vehicles left the compound and headed for the border, the U.S. thought someone important was trying to escape to Syria.
It was good intelligence about potential high-value targets, but we didn't know who. So, you know, we just knew there was an attempt to flee Iraq, and so we went after the targets. U.S. aircraft struck both the compound and the convoy. One vehicle made it into Syrian territory. The American aircraft gave chase and shot it up, wounding 5 Syrian border guards in the process. 12 days later, the U.S. is still trying to figure out what it hit. They're still looking through the compound, looking through the other wreckage of the vehicles, and trying to determine that.
So far, there is only one confirmed dead. What happened to the other people that must have been in that convoy?
It was night. It was a very short distance to the Syrian border. It's entirely possible people got away.
For now, Saddam and his two sons remain as elusive as peace and security in Iraq. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
The Pentagon today released videotape of an airborne close encounter off North Korea, which occurred last March. It shows North Korean MiG-29 fighters intercepting a U.S. Air Force reconnaissance plane in international airspace more than 100 miles from the Korean coast. The North Koreans armed their missiles but did not fire and eventually broke off the pursuit. Now to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Both sides took cautious but crucial steps toward peace today, following the course laid out in the U.S.-backed roadmap. But there's still a long way to go. CBS News correspondent David Hawkins reports from the West Bank.
You don't see Israeli and Palestinian generals shaking hands very often, or Palestinian terrorist groups calling for a ceasefire. Or for that matter, Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon urging patience and restraint after a Palestinian attack the day after a ceasefire's been declared. But after a 2-day talking to from U.S. National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, Israelis and Palestinians are trying to be on their best behavior. Israel has pulled some of its tanks and troops out of part of the Gaza Strip, and Palestinian security forces are trying to reassert their authority there as the two sides slowly start to follow the U.S.-backed roadmap for peace. Israeli and Palestinian leaders are dancing to the Bush administration's tune, but the people here have seen this dance before. 1 step forward, then 2 steps back. At a checkpoint between Jerusalem and Ramallah, Palestinians say the roadmap's a dead end unless Israel keeps its promise to withdraw all of its soldiers.
If I put a 9-inch knife in your back and I take it out 1 inch, it's still there 8 inches.
You've seen ceasefires fail before. Do you think this will be any different?
We have to be always optimistic, but we don't see a lot of hope.
Israelis aren't very hopeful either. How many ceasefires have you seen in the last 2.5, 3 years?
Years, I was thinking weeks. Countless. I couldn't even count.
Oh, it's just a whole lot of talking. Just talking and promises that they never keep.
There are miles to go along the road to peace before Israelis and Palestinians will let themselves believe that they'll ever get there. David Hawkins, CBS News, Calandia.
In this country, Tropical Storm Bill is pummeling the central Gulf Coast. The center passed east of Morgan City, Louisiana late this afternoon, carrying with it winds of 60 miles an hour. It spawned one tornado near New Orleans and left nearly 13 inches of rain in Mississippi. As Bill continues along its projected path, it could drop several more inches in parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and western Florida before moving on to the Carolinas. Streets were flooded near Houma, Louisiana, while in Grand Isle, the storm surge broke through a levee. Beach erosion was also the story in Galveston, Texas. Still, it was surf's up for some hardy souls. In Texas, police are investigating the mysterious disappearance of a promising college basketball player. CBS News correspondent Bob McNamara has some exclusive information tonight about the case.
Dennehy again makes a move and scores.
6'10" Patrick Dennehy, who played at New Mexico before transferring to Baylor last year, has been missing for nearly 3 weeks. And police say the case of the 21-year-old Northern California native goes beyond a missing persons investigation.
Because of the information being received in regards to Mr. Dennehy's disappearance, this case is being investigated as if he were a victim of a homicide.
Last week, in this Virginia Beach, Virginia parking lot, Dennehy's abandoned SUV turned up for no known reason, its license plates gone. The Waco apartment he shared with 2 other basketball players was searched by police over 2 days, and team members have also been questioned.
Players and coaches have talked to the investigators, and we've been eager to help in any way we can.
Dennehy's girlfriend talked to him by phone the night he disappeared.
It was just a typical conversation in the evening, just typical how we were doing. He told me he just needed to go and call me the next day.
This conservative Baptist-led university has been stunned by the case, threatening to damage an athletic program and the school itself.
It's pretty upsetting that the team can even be suspects.
I think that he's probably not with us anymore, unfortunately.
Late today, CBS News obtained a copy of an affidavit that names one of Dennehy's roommates as a possible suspect. An informant in Delaware telling police that Dennehy and his roommate were out shooting guns when an argument erupted and Dennehy was shot in the head. Waco police had no comment. Bob McNamara, CBS News, Waco, Texas.
Still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, the dangerous drug young clubgoers know they can get away with, even if they're caught. Find out why next. The never-ending campaign by federal, state, and local authorities against illicit drug use has hit a roadblock involving one particular drug popular with young clubgoers. CBS News investigative correspondent Cheryl Atkinson looked into why users of a drug nicknamed Special K often get a free pass.
When it comes to the club scene, one designer drug is thriving with the help of a strange legal loophole.
They snort it. Kind of like an alternate to ecstasy, I guess.
Ketamine, also called Special K, is a potent animal tranquilizer and a growing thorn in the side of authorities.
There's been a great increase in the amount that we've seen out in the clubs.
Yet police in Washington, D.C. and other big cities find they lack the legal tools to battle Special K. That's the loophole. The penalty for having small amounts is negligible, so police often confiscate the drug, but let the users go.
So is it true that it really doesn't even make sense to try to prosecute these cases?
It's very difficult. I mean, it's a dangerous drug without a doubt. And we try to take much of it off the street as we can. But in most cases, the U.S. Attorney won't prosecute it.
So even if users get caught, they know they won't get in trouble. That makes Special K in huge demand.
The seizure in this case was at a veterinary clinic at a horse farm
where U.S. drug agents found 7,000 vials, enough to sedate an army of horses or get thousands of kids high.
The liquid would be dried down to obtain a powder, a crystalline powder that looks quite like this.
A ketamine high ranges from an out-of-body experience called a K-hole to a coma. Because it's an anesthetic, users can hurt themselves and not even feel it. Because it can temporarily paralyze, it's emerged as a date rape drug secretly slipped into a victim's drink. The problem is so serious, there's a growing market for test strips like these. Sprinkle a drop of your drink on it. Bright blue means trouble.
That's what a positive would look like if one of the drugs, specifically in this case ketamine, is registered with the card.
Experts insist Special K is just as dangerous to users as other club drugs that carry stiffer penalties. But for now, the laws don't reflect that, making it a sadly convenient drug of choice. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Springfield, Virginia.
Chicago authorities said today they have found no evidence so far to warrant criminal charges in the weekend porch collapse that killed 12 young people. As the investigation continues, a makeshift memorial appeared at the site where a third-floor porch jammed with college-age partygoers fell early on Sunday morning, crushing those below. Along with the 12 dead, nearly 60 were injured. Still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, this woman got sick and her body aged taking care of an ill relative. The reason? Stay with us and you'll find out. On the CBS Health Watch, new research tonight provides insight into something that affects us all to some degree: stress. CBS's Elizabeth Caledon reports stress triggers chemical changes that make us more susceptible to age-related diseases, and the effects can linger on for years.
At 50 years old, Cora Wiggins has put her social life and goals on hold to care full-time for an aunt with Alzheimer's disease. Now her own health is declining.
Chronic fatigue, been diagnosed with hypertension, bouts of depression.
Millions of Americans like Cora, living with the stress of caring for an elderly or sick relative, are finding their own health is compromised. Now researchers say they've zeroed in on a key reason why. It turns out a body under chronic stress releases higher levels of a chemical called interleukin-6, or IL-6, which weakens the immune system. Researchers Janice Kiecolt-Glaser and her husband Ronald Glaser studied 119 caregivers of Alzheimer's patients and compared them to non-caregivers. Not only were IL-6 levels higher, their immune systems were prematurely aged.
The caregivers looked like people who were 90 years old, but in reality the average age was 75.
Even more alarming, the negative effects of stress could be measured in caregivers long after the person they were caring for died.
Whatever was going on with their immune system, that the damage was permanent.
Eliminating stress, especially in situations like this, is easier said than done. But doctors emphasize that caregivers should make it a priority to seek support and avoid isolation. The study doesn't only apply to those caring for the elderly. Most Americans consider coping with stress just part of modern life. The research suggests we're not coping well enough, though, and stress has become a full-fledged public health problem. Elizabeth Caledon, CBS News, New York.
Next up on tonight's CBS Evening News, a long life in a starring role, remembering Catherine the Great.
At 6.
Now a quick look at some of the stories that we're working on for later on this week. We'll tell you about a medication that could help people work long into the night without falling asleep. New help for America's busy families. Daycare. It's not just for kids anymore. And it's happening all over the country. Schools caught in a money crunch. Here in New York City tomorrow night, the bright lights of Broadway will dim for a moment. A final tribute to one of the brightest and most enduring stars ever of stage or screen. Katharine Hepburn, who died yesterday at the age of 96, insisted there be no public funeral or memorial service. But oh, what a legacy on film she left us all. And as Jerry Bowen remembers, what a long, full life she lived.
My name's Eva Lovelace, my stage name. You probably never heard of me because I'm just starting.
It didn't take long for the movie world to hear about Katharine Hepburn.
In true Hollywood tradition, Eva Lovelace does become a star, and she made Katharine Hepburn a star, too.
With only her third feature film, Hepburn won the first of her 4 Oscars and started a career filled with roles as the strong-willed, independent woman.
I know you, Henry. I know every twist and bend you've got, and I'll be waiting round each corner for you.
Truth be told, she was playing herself.
I'd always been told you could do anything, Kath, anything. Why not be a famous actress?
Dad was a Connecticut doctor. Her mother, Catherine, a pioneering feminist who campaigned for birth control and a woman's right to vote.
I always expected to be famous, to be a success. I was full of myself.
Very full. Here's Hepburn in home movies, experimenting with makeup and costumes years before she went to Hollywood. Films taken by Ludlow Ogden Smith, her only husband, the husband she abandoned to fulfill her ambition.
I'm going to live my own life, do as I say.
Oh. Hepburn's fame soared in the 30s, then her career crashed, revived by the Philadelphia Story. The very next film changed her life, a feature with Spencer Tracy, the first of 9 films they did together.
I was sort of hoping that you'd kiss me goodbye.
I was sort of hoping that you'd ask me.
Hepburn did not believe she could have both a career and a marriage. Instead, she had a 27-year-long affair, a separate life with Spencer Tracy, a Catholic who never divorced his wife.
What you have to understand is that it gave me pleasure to make him happy.
Hepburn will be remembered for starring in some of the truly fine films of all time, and a life driven by a simple philosophy.
Well, I think that just being alive is a tremendous opportunity. It's what you do with it that matters.
And the way she did it is remembered tonight, too. Katharine Hepburn aspired to greatness and found it. Jerry Bowen, CBS News, Hollywood.
Goodbye, Catherine the Great. And that's the CBS Evening News for this Monday. For Dan Rather, I'm John Roberts in New York. Thanks for choosing CBS News. Have a good night.
For news 24 hours a day, log on to cbsnews.com. Turning night into day, the newest way to cheat sleep tomorrow. Experience CBS News.